Welcome to our channel Top Reddit Story. Make sure to subscribe our channel and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our hardest to reply your comment. People who worked for sketchy employers or businesses. What was your duck this time out moment? Was homeless and desperate to get back on my feet. Applied at sandwich shop in a mall. Interviewer looked at application. Looked at me. Said, "You go home and change. Come back. We'll put you behind counter. See how you do." Ecstatic me. Am I hired? No. We just try you out for little. See how you do. Left and did not return. In mall a few days later. He came over to yell at me about not showing up for work. Dude. Duck you. You didn't hire me. You just wanted free labor for a day. I'm not an idiot. Walked away. We went 3 pay cycles, 6 weeks, being told our checks were coming. But a bank error had wiped the payroll account and they were working on the loan to cover pay while they got the problem fixed. Everyone was then paid our full back pay, $30,000 plus in some cases, in cash. I took it and handed in my 2 weeks notice. The boss then gave me my expected pay for those 2 weeks in cash and told me not to come back. Watched my boss grab one of my co-workers by the throat and push him up against a wall because he was accused of stealing something. Turned out he didn't steal anything. Working at a nightclub. GM wanted me to fill Grey Goose bottles with Mr. Boston vodka to sell to people after they'd been drinking. He dropped and shattered a bottle of Patron. Then he wanted to use a strainer to put the glass shattered tequila into an open bottle at the bar. I got a below minimum wage check for 2 weeks. I was working my ass off. I said go duck yourself after confronting him about the check. Never came back and they were out of business like 2 months later. My boss asked me to help him commit insurance fraud. I was working for a large Ford dealer in MA and the parts department was prone to flooding. This day was a flood day. My boss walked around gathering up all of the expensive items that we'd been stuck with over the years and threw them into a shopping cart. He instructed me to push the cart outside and spray everything down with a hose to mimic flood damage. I refused. When I wised up and did some research into a state law that my boss claimed required clients to give us certain personal information. No such law exists. He was literally lying to clients' faces and having all of his employees do the same. Oh. And he was scamming the elderly with seemingly no remorse. He's currently being sued by elder law attorneys in 3 separate cases. My boss asked numerous times to come in on a non-scheduled day and place the hours during the next pay period. Those hours got denied every time. Essentially it was free work. Asked for me to get information on the competition and report to higher ups. Boss would forget to inform me of a meeting and tell the higher ups that I was lazy and didn't want to attend. The final straw. I had multiple out-of-state interviews for grad school. Time off did not get denied but the boss said we expect you to be at work on the days off I requested. The request was placed 2 months prior. My boss took away my breaks. Then drink called me one night for having a cup of tea at the end of a long shift. He screamed down the phone at me for 10 minutes. I walked out mid-shift and never came back. During my first shift, the manager made me drive a car thing even though I told him that I never drove anything before and then got mad at me when I crashed it. I ended up quitting after 3 weeks because one of my co-workers kept harassing me about wanting to have a threesome with me and my partner and my manager refused to do anything about it because he's a good kid and wouldn't do that. Edit. Spelling. Was told to pour the water and sediments from core drilling concrete floors in a hospital into the toilets and flush. That way when they clogged the next day we could be hired to replace them. Worst plumbing company ever. I worked at a burger place in college. It was casual dining. So instead of regular tipping, we had a tip jar by the cash registers. Now, the jar was clearly labeled tips in huge capital letters. At the end of the night, the cashier would count out all the tip money and place it in an envelope that went directly to the owner. The owner would take all the tips and keep them for himself. He was able to get away with this because he was already paying us minimum wage, so tips weren't legally required. Also, his restaurant was walking distance from the college campus. If any employees got fed up with this system, which many did, and quit, he had a constant supply of broke college kids looking for part-time work to replace the quitters. After a few months of working there, I started recognizing repeat customers. I felt really bad because many of them would make an extra effort to tip because they thought the money was going to us, the workers. There was this kindly retired lawyer who stopped by every week. He would tip me extremely generously. I couldn't handle the guilt anymore. So I politely let him know that the money wasn't actually going to me or any of my co-workers. And that I felt bad that he was tipping us under the impression that it was. The retired lawyer got extremely angry. Because I guess there were some pretty serious legal ramifications to what the owner was doing. Because the tip jar had tips written on it. The owner was deceiving the customers. The lawyer spoke with the owner directly and called him out on his bullshit. As a solution, the owner replaced the sticker that said tips on the tip jar with a picture of the restaurant logo. He was still able to keep his tip money, but apparently without the legal risk. Because technically he was not collecting it under false pretenses anymore since the jar no longer expressly said tips. I quit the next day. I worked at Beachside Bar for a little bit last summer and the dude who ran the place was sketchy as duck. He told me to do all kinds of shady things that would get any business shut down in a heartbeat. He said if someone came to the bar and slid a $20 towards me to not check their ID and serve them regardless. He said if I saw a beach cop come by to hide any bottles on the counter down below the well by the drainage grates. He dropped a burger on the floor while grilling it. Picked it up. Put the SHHHH finger over his mouth and kept grilling it. He would sometimes take deliveries through the back door and tell me I wasn't allowed to be in the back room when he was taking the delivery. Always hid the boxes away before telling me I could go back in. The guy was sketchy as duck and I never got answers for his shadiness. The final straw for me was when he backed his car into another car parked in his lot and told me to write a note apologizing for hitting the car and a number to contact for reparations. He told me to write down my name and number and that he would pay me back for any money I had to give to the victim. I worked there for about 15 minutes after that, then left and never came back. I worked customer support for a mobile game company. I was honest with a disheartened customer who had complained that recent changes had made the game pay to win. It had, in truth, been a glitch with an update. I told them as much, assuring them the team would be fixing it in the next update. But then the game's profits skyrocketed. The team kept the glitch and put out a statement describing the change as an intentional one designed to improve the play experience. But there was my name plastered all over the game forums, claiming the opposite. I technically worked for a separate company that provided support for several studios. But the studio behind this game was our biggest customer. They approached my bosses. Furious, I jeopardized their cash cow and demanded I be fired. I promptly became familiar with the underside of the bus, as I was gone within the week. When I was asked to roll over hours to other part-time employees to other pay periods to avoid fines, despite being understaffed and I myself being part-time as well. Never work in radio, kids. What the hell? It's what happens when you try to run a company on mostly part-time labor except sales and the 3 DJs for 6 stations. 29 hours per week max. I wish I would have taken that place down for this because it's super illegal. Well, I worked at a tattoo shop. The guy and business were legit. And my boss was a nice guy at first. He had security cameras up, which was no big deal to me cause it's not like I was stealing shit. Well, around Halloween, the owner was friends with this bartender chick and she wanted to bartend topless, but have a jersey painted on her to look like she had a top on. I had no problem with that. What I did have a problem with was him calling in his buddies the next day to watch his security footage of him painting this girl while she was naked. Another time I was working, next day I quit. He called his buddies in because he had security camera footage of an 18-year-old girl giving him a BJ for a tattoo. He was in his 50s. I was done after that. And the place closed down 6 months later. Worked with the mentally disabled and the manager was stealing food and money from them. I turned her into the office. She just got yelled at. Asked to transfer. Because I couldn't be an assistant to someone who went against my morals. Turned her into the state as well. Nothing happened. Went to a new house under a different director, and after a year of being at that house the manager told me I can't transfer to the day program to better fit my needs with ours. The AD told me I didn't need her permission. So I put in my 2 weeks at that house, and when she found out I was going to their day program she wrote me up for things I didn't do, so I would have to stay at the house she managed. I left that day and never went back. I couldn't work with a company that allowed stealing from clients and was petty. I worked in a comic book store when I was a kid. The owner was a fantastic guy. The store was in a strip mall and the guys at the Chinese takeout place at the end owned all the stores. This was before everyone used credit cards all the time, so the Chinese landlords would come around and collect the rent in cash. One of the partners at the takeout came in one day and told us that we couldn't pay in cash anymore. It had to be a mail check. One of the other Chinese owners had been telling his partners that some of the stores were behind on the rent, but he was collecting the cash and then gambling it away. I worked with a subcontractor remodeling bathrooms for major stores up and down the East Coast. They were considered the best team, so got a lot of the jobs. My wife was friends with the crew leader's daughter, so he brought me along for one summer. It turns out they were so good because they would take a lot of drugas that allowed them to never sleep. They would get a week's job done in a couple days, which made for really good money, so I stuck around. I had to bow out when they started shooting up heroin in the hotel room. They would then bring the needles to the hotel management, claiming they were left in our room in an attempt to get a refund for the room to save even more money for themselves. First job out of uni was as an events manager. Planning a new event in North Wales. Worked for 10-12 weeks on the planning and development. Until I got to the point where I needed to start paying for marketing materials, booking contracts, deposits, etc. Then found out the guy behind the company was trying to get £500,000 government funding to put the event on. Funding that was on the basis of like spending, match funding. Put my finance requests into the boss, who said we don't have any money to spend until we get the funding in. I pointed out the funding was on a matched basis. He said don't worry, we can make it look like we spent our £500,000 and get the funding for nothing. Nope, out of there. Please create multiple fake accounts to feign popularity of our website. Please engage in a 1-1 message with every new sign up. Sign-ups weren't an issue. There were 1000s. It was the interaction and engagement that the platform struggles with. Having me act out a script and be interacting with myself so you seem busier than you are? No thanks. When my boss at the supermarket deli asked me to crawl into the large compactor dumpster to pull out expired meat, scrape the expiration dates off of the packages, and sell them. I was 17 working at a Tex-Mex place, and the boss asked me to leave work to do odd jobs at his house, across the street, a couple times. First time was just to water his pepper plants. Second time was to stand on his shoulders and hang his recently deceased aunt's many vintage hats on the living room wall. Took all afternoon with him being a sketchy creep, and he didn't even give me a hat. I didn't nope out at this point. Or even after I saw his huge bag of Coke on the kitchen counter. Later he opened an ice cream shop on the same block and had me work the counter a couple times by myself with absolutely no training. I had to tell every customer that they couldn't have any of the fancy milkshakes or blizzards or whatever he put on the menu BC I didn't know how to make them. Gave away free ice cream scoops. Still didn't leave. Worked that job several months until a hurricane finally destroyed all the properties. First our paychecks bounced, we got paid cash the next day. Then a week later the electric company turned off the power for not paying the bill. I quit the next morning. They paid £2.40 an hour after selling the hob as an apprenticeship. I was only given a 12-week contract with them, and it took a minimum of 33 weeks before you got paid minimum wage for passing the apprenticeship. I didn't mind as it was a summer job where I lived on site and they provided 3 cooked meals a day. The kicker was when I injured my foot while doing a training activity. I was stuck midway up a climbing tower for 30 minutes. As the weeks went in, my foot got worse and I asked to be taken off work activities that worsened it. They made me sign a sheet saying that I had a previous foot injury before I started working there. I was also accused of bullying my colleague when I asked her if she wanted a cup of tea. While the job itself was fun, I decided to never work there again. Edit. I should also add that they would only pay us a max of 42 hours a week. Even though most weeks it would be more like 60 hours. Worked at a small bakery. They were paying me under the table but also removing taxes from my paycheck and lying about it. I noped out of there when I found out they were also paying several employees below minimum wage under the table and were getting away with it because they couldn't get proper jobs, because of criminal records, or being mentally handicapped or whatever else. When I took the job, it was $4.14 an hour. Then it became $10 an hour a week later. Then my hours got capped at 20 a week. But I was still expected to come as much as needed. That's when I quit. Took them 3 months to finally pay me $400 for 100 hours of work. Restaurants can be sketchy as duck. Asked to recruit for the company at a college campus. After an hour there, I just felt like I was tricking kids into working for the same shitty company I was working for. So I quit right there on the spot. Faked financials to earn bonuses. Talking hundreds of thousands. Also, I didn't get any incentive to do it besides not getting fired. Just happened to me 2 weeks ago. My boss was never around and everyone else quit. He pretended to be his wife and told me he was in the hospital and to come get the keys so I could work alone. I stood in the driveway for 2 hours while she said, "I'll let you know where they are." His actual wife called me later. Said she never texted me. Boss was out smoking crack. Duck this, I'm outta here. I went to work for Vector Marketing, which is the people who sell Cutco knives to people in their own home. I figured whatever, I'll give it a shot. I got all the way through training and the guy was like, "Okay, now it's time to purchase your own set of knives." I had no idea I was supposed to buy my own and that it was a MLM scam, so I said I had to go to the bathroom and left. Worked a summer for a furniture place that was clearly going under due to mismanagement. Was informed that we might not get paid going forward, as the company was falling on hard times as it closed, but we were still expected to work to help out the company in its time of need. I have them my 2-week notice right then and there and they berated me for it. I once had an interview for a job selling insurance to old people. If I didn't sell enough each day, I would have to pay them. The worst part is that they slapped me with a "you don't have enough experience to work here" at the end of the interview. Worked on a boat that hauled up anchors from another boat and moved them to help move the vessel to lay cable in a river. With blisters and lines snapping out of my hands constantly due to incorrectly placed line hauling mechanics. I still worked. 4 weeks of 15-hour days every day and it paid well. Anchors would sometime get fouled in its own cable. The last day, I saw the captain of the anchored vessel rappel down a line on the bow next to the fouled anchor and then was given a sledgehammer. From about 30 feet away my boat was hanging around and watching this guy bash a 2,000-pound anchor in order to uncoil itself from the wire. My mouth is completely jaw-dropped open. He managed to bash it loose, uncoil itself violently and come out unscathed. Then proceeded to climb up a line and continue for 3 more hours of work. Port captain was on my boat to understand why guys quit. My mouth was dry from it being open for so long. I figure the same for everyone else and that's why not much else was that day. We docked the boat and I told everyone on my boat I was leaving. They only realized I wasn't kidding when I packed my box. Thank you, Dad, for picking up your adult son hours away from home. I already knew they were engaging in wage theft of the hourly workers and that they were doing the absolute minimum and or looking the other way when it came to immigration verification. After going through their third HR person in 2.5 years, they approached me to see if I would be willing to help out in processing and signing off on immigration and HR forms. Nope. I polished up the resume and got a different job a couple months later. No way did I want my signature on sheet when I saw other feds came through. Serious, people who have disappeared and started a new life. What's your story? Here's the story. Was with someone who was emotionally abusive toward me. I let them isolate me from friends and family. Moved across the country. Gave up a lot to be with her. Married her. But I realized that things would likely never improve. One day I packed everything I could into a suitcase. Told her it was over and that no. Threatening suicide again would not stop me this time. I walked to the train station. Got to the airport. Called the police to let them know they had a potentiality suicidal person that they ought to check on. And flew back home. I felt bad about it. But I'm an exponentially happier and healthy person for it. Throwaway. Had a super shitty childhood. Born in the 70s where it was really common and pretty much accepted that wives and kids would get beaten to keep them in line. Left home at 18 and put myself through school. Studied accounting and tax. Built a practice and went down to Playa del Carmen 1 year and fell in love with the place. The internet is widely available everywhere. Including Mexico. So now I work online and it's working out well. I left California for good last July when my family health insurance hit $1,300 a month. The peso is currently at 21. I am living a dream life on the beach in the Mayan Riviera for a pittance of what I was paying in the Bay Area. I also have reduced stress. Better sleep. Lost weight. I even stopped grinding my teeth at night. It's so beautiful here. I am never going back. Ever. I was a widely known escort. I had everything. I was rich. Went to parties. Did all types of drugs. Met the rich and famous of Hollywood. etc. I fell in love with a middle-class man. I stopped escorting to start being in a real relationship with someone I was in love with. California legalized gay marriage and we got married. Soon after I changed my last name and left the state overnight. I had nothing to lose. Moved to a tiny town with a pop of 500. And tomorrow I go to school, a simple small town school teacher. I moved out after spending my entire life in my hometown. I was just getting sick of the locals and people that hate me, especially past mistakes. On the other hand, my ex was stalking me hard at a point that I lost all faith within my community and decided to move into another state far away. Deleted all my social networking accounts and got a new phone number. I only maintained contact with my longtime best friends. Last thing I heard, my ex is still looking for me. I told my family I was leaving and I'd write when I felt I should. No address, no number. I've written them twice a year for a few years just so they know I'm alive and happy. I hated my friends and hated where I was, so I left. I still haven't met anyone I care for, but I'm sure the day will come so long as I'm honest and kind. My parents divorced when I was little. My mother beat me cause she hated my dad and my dad manipulated me cause he hated my mother. At 19 I was kicked out of the house cause my dad didn't feel like taking care of me anymore. He knew my best friend's parents would take me in, so he dumped me on them. I lived with my best friend's parents for 2 years. I call them Mama and Papa. They are my real family. I moved out 7 months ago to live on my own. Mama and Papa know where I live. My bio parents do not. I don't want my bio parents to know it either. They have my phone number and that is it. Left an emotionally and mentally abusive relationship. Packed everything I could fit of mine and my 2 kids' things in 2 suitcases. Moved across the country without telling a lot of people. And met my amazing husband a few months later. I only speak to my ex now because I have for our son. He's still the same pose I left that can't keep a job and jumps from chick to make himself feel like a man. Only regret I have is that I haven't seen my mom and sister in 2 years. When I was 15, my mother dropped me off at homeless shelter. After that I lived with a friend until I was 18. In that time I realized two things. The life I was headed for was not the life I wanted. I needed to transition, and if I maintained contact with my extended family, who are lovely for the most part, I would be forced to maintain a relationship with my mother. One day, with those two ideas motivating me, I packed what few things I owned and took a Greyhound 300 miles north to a tiny little town called Moscow. It's a wonderful place. Really the only place in Idaho you'd ever want to visit. It only has a population of about 20,000 people, but everything is so close together you could live there your whole life without ever needing to drive. I kept contact with my father, divorced, brothers, and the friend, but everyone else in that town just never heard from me again. I haven't talked to my mother in 7 years now. I'm not even sure if she knows I transitioned. For the best really. I'm pretty happy out here in Seattle. The life I have now is more than I ever thought I deserved. I knew a kid in middle school that did this. Holy cow. I'd forgotten about him until now. He had a single mom and kind of a bully of an older brother. I wasn't particularly close to him, but he really didn't have a lot of friends. He was kind of a brick. After middle school his family moved to Midwest. He called my house like once a year. Usually from some other person's house. He acted like he was not calling long distance. He would shoot the sheet for like 20 minutes. One of the last times he did that he said he ran away from home at 17. He asked if I could send him some money. He gave me an address and I sent him like $40. I had just gotten like my third paycheck ever. This was before the internet was so big. I called him a few months later to check on him and his brother told me that he thinks he was dead of an overdose. I felt bad. Maybe my $40 contributed to that. Like 6 months later my little sister told me a friend called to say hi. I was dating a girl and never home. I think it was him. I've moved a few times and tried finding him on social media but never had luck. I have a few friends that had weird lives and just kinda disappeared. That's the reason I have social media. So I can be found. I know a guy who did this. He was in his 50s, no kids and a wife who was leaving him for another man. He just said duck it. Over a few months he got a bunch more credit cards and worked to get the highest limits he could. Then one day he maxed them all out buying gold and other things he could turn into cash. Turned the cash into Bitcoin and left for Thailand. I'm not sure exactly how he hides the money and doesn't get caught, but my guess is that even though it's a lot to me, it's not that much to the banks that they are going to Asia to get him. Probably takes a while too. Anyways, he just lives it up in Thailand instead of being poor and miserable in America for his golden years. My family and I have a decent relationship, but I left my hometown to get away from them. I guess because of that, I disappeared. My family and I have completely different values, and I can't live authentically or be my true self around them. They have their own issues, and I was always the mediator. They never paid attention to me because I keep my problems to myself. I couldn't take it anymore. I met a guy online halfway across the country. After meeting in person, we had a year-long LDR. I started planning my move away from my hometown without telling my family. When they found out, they flipped. It was horrible and tense. But I stood my ground and packed up to move with my partner. I'm a good 1,000 plus miles away now. Sometimes you've gotta do what you've gotta do. My life is a series of new lives. Started when my parents divorced and I got placed with my mom. Ran away. Lived with my grandfather. Moved in with my dad when the courts finally realized I wasn't going to stay with my mom. Move in with my dad. Tried running again. But so close to college I just went there, taking advantage of my dad's promise to pay if I ditched my mom. I went to a college across the state from him. Finished college. Moving from house to house for a total of 8-9 dorms in 5 years. Went to work in the hardest schools in Texas. After my health started to fail due to the stress, I ended up leaving everything and everyone to go to Korea. I kept up with my parents every once in a while. Came back home and realized how much home felt like a foreign country. Went back to Korea. Married with a kid now. It feels really odd not moving every year or trying something new. Growing up sucks at times. But the new life is good. My wife is closer to my family than I am. My kid is wonderful and I feel closer to him than I was to any of my family. As soon as I graduated high school, I packed everything I owned in my Honda Accord and a U-Haul trailer, including my motorcycle, and moved to Phoenix, Arizona to study lutherie, the construction of stringed instruments. The only people I told I was moving were my parents and direct family. Clean break from everyone else I knew. I used to associate with some pretty sketchy people that I did not want in my life anymore. I have bounced around quite a bit since then. And it's always exciting every time. I know of someone who told their job they were leaving to check into a psych hospital and left the state instead. Didn't tell anyone where they were going except their family. Never heard from any of their friends back home, so ended up giving up on all those relationships. Settled in an unnamed small town in a cheap apartment. Walked into a local business that had a help wanted ad on Craigslist and landed a job on the spot without references being checked. I don't think it was the best decision overall, but it was a good decision at the time. I guess I haven't disappeared. But I never reappeared, I suppose. I was living in a small town in a European country and decided to explore Asia for a while. I lived in China and Korea both for about 2 years or so. Then moved to Japan for 5 years. I told all of my friends it would be for 9 months. Almost 10 years later, I've deleted my Facebook and only speak to my parents and sister. I refuse to set a foot back in my hometown. It ruined my confidence and I hate the people there. I've left good friends there, but it was soul crushing to be there. I'm doing this if my wife ever leaves. 2 years ago I had an on-the-road job. Without getting into the details, large companies don't design or build their own factory automation. I worked for a company that did. And I was on the debug team that chased down the causes of faults. Wrote code for new faults. Found the loose wires. Rewrote code that should work but didn't. etc. They would keep me at the customer site for months or years after startup to ensure all the intermittent kinks were ironed out. It was the most stressful, challenging, gratifying thing I've ever done. But I basically had an ultimatum to choose between that travel career and getting married. I think I made the right choice with marriage. I even make more than 2x the money I did debugging. But she's all that keeps me in one place. Moving all the time was part of what kept me motivated and excited about life. I've made no friends in our current city. I rarely contact my family. I like music festivals and used to love rock climbing. Is love to take some time to be a bum. I just know that she's the only thing that keeps me sane in this sedentary lifestyle. And sometimes I'm very tempted to sabotage my marriage just to justify running away. I'm about to pack up and leave. I've talked it over with friends and family and was strongly advised for me to do it. So I'm not necessarily disappearing. But I will have to start new. It's a stressful process since I've lived in the same county all my life and now I'm moving to a different state and it might be my new home where I have 0 friends. Not my story. But my dad's. One night he just up and left my mom, my 2 older brothers and myself. With no word for years. Turns out alcoholism drove him to leave when my mom asked him to straighten up. He started another family. Things went south. Either they left him, or he left them, I can't quite remember. He ended up getting a girlfriend and we actually tried to reconcile. He was with her for a bit. Then he left again. He went back to his second family. I'm glad to say he's not a part of my life. Too much shit for me. I went ghost for a short period of time from my mother. I was 17 years old. My mom was abusive, manipulative and all kinds of crazy. I could go on for days about how badly she treated my sisters, father and myself. One day after a particularly bad beating I got it in my mind to move out of the house, but I would have to do it at night. So I packed a lot of things that I deemed valuable and called a few friends to see if anyone could help. I took a chance and moved in with a man that I had literally just met a week or two prior. Loaded down and tired of my mother's crap, I left and went MIA for about 6 months. The reason I am no longer completely MIA is because she has my little brother that has Downs. I'm much happier in life now, and although there's some stuff I just can't get back, I've gained much more by being able to be myself and being able to breathe. I'm proud to say no one wakes me up at 5 AM beating me, because I was smart enough to have enough and pull myself out from under her grasp. Feel free to ask questions. After a decade in an abusive relationship, and the following year of being stalked by him, I finally found the courage to ask for help. I left with a duffel bag, whatever little money I was able to save, and went to live with my parents for a month or so until plans were finalized. Only my immediate family knows where I am. I'm now married, safe, and happy. Happier than I've ever been.